Should be a short video. Shorter, just because I'm running out of time on the camera. Anyway, some new guy, John Doe guy, Northern European of some type. Anyway, made a video talking about nihilism, sort of. So I took notes, and so I'll deal with the notes in terms of the conversation about optimism and pessimism sort of came up, and he gets into the idea of relative value later, so I'll get to it later. But it always has to be understood in this context that there's two sides to us. There's this emotional animal, and then there's the thinking machine. And the simple argument is no point in being pessimistic emotionally. Okay, no point in being an emotional wreck, because that gets you nowhere. So emotional pain, if you can mitigate against it, if you can be an emotional nihilist, yeah, that's the way to be, because it makes it easier to do the work. If you don't have any sense of smell, it's easier to work in the shit factory, that kind of thing. And the real game is maximizing this intellectual thing, the thinking part, and not only making it, optimizing the logic your brain is using, saying, well, I can see the silly things, okay, oh, religion, yeah, I can pull that worm out of that apple, but it's this idea of, yes, first you have to have a good understanding of the game, and then you play the game. You do what the logic requires to gain value action out of yourself. And part of the value action has as its premise a recognition that there is a consequence, that the world is in a state, and it's going to be in a future state, and the future state would be preferable that the future state maximize whatever value there is. So it either prevents the harm, or it somehow mitigates against the level of it, and all that kind of stuff. But again, you have to be able to concede the existence of this mechanism of harm as some sort of absolute, not some sort of relative. And I've extensively talked about that idea, and it's not that it's irritating that it keeps coming up, that somehow you have to argue that the fact that we feel is a fact. The fact that we have this conscious sensation of awareness, that it has qualia, that we can feel very good or very bad, and that there's goodness and badness in that very fact. The fact that we feel creates value. Anything feeling is having a value experience, is a valuable experience. And it's easy to recognize that if you can prevent anything, any conscious thing, you can change an outcome, prevent it from suffering. It's an intrinsic good in and of itself. So if it's separate from any other consequence, it will change nothing else. The only thing you're going to change is something suffers or something doesn't suffer. You're not going to change any happiness equation. It would be rational to prevent the suffering, because it's irrational not to accept its existence. It's part of the math. It's the 2 + 2 = 4 kind of logic. It's as hard and as firm as that, in the sense that you personally understand the sensations. You understand them to be quite absolutely good or bad. Everybody knows sensations that are good and sensations that are bad. And the idea of a bad sensation, regardless of its cause, is understandable absolutely as bad. And so there's no argument about, you don't need to have this relative conversation about what makes people feel good or bad, or what causes them pain and suffering. The idea is, no matter what it is, you're trying to prevent the pain and the suffering, the badness. You don't care whether one person enjoys the very thing the other person finds repulsive. That's irrelevant. You're just trying to prevent the thing, the individual thing, from experiencing the individual conscious experience. And it's always an individual one. So I just say that this is an intellectual fact, that you haven't done your job intellectually if you haven't figured out that the illusion of consciousness does do something different than plastic bottle, that the capacity to experience sensation through personal experience, we gain this knowledge, is substantive. It's not nothing. It's a something. It's distinctively different. It's significant. It's, you could just keep going through all those kinds of adjectives to describe. It's important. It's it has magnitude. It has value, magnitude. That can't, in my opinion, be rationally denied. And you're denying your own personal experience, in my opinion, to deny that truth. You're just pretending, well, I'll just pretend my consciousness isn't really happening. I'll just pretend that the visceral realness of the horror or pain isn't a real thing. And of course, that just is a denial of a reality. It's right there in front of you. The 2 plus the 2 equals the 4, and you're pretending I don't have to see that. And that's a delusion. That's silly. It's crazy. It's insane. It's fucktarded. I don't think it could ever, there'll be no future that can find that reasonable unless the future becomes an idiot. Because it's idiotic on its face. So in my opinion, this has nothing to do with relative definitions of value, subjective, individual, emotional responses to individual circumstances. It just has to do with a recognition that the emotional response of a positive or negative sensation is a fact. And the idea is who cares what causes negative sensations? The sensations are what is the only rational thing that needs to be prevented. The cause is important if it's communal. If an AIDS virus causes pain and suffering exclusively and does nothing else, well, then, yeah, you can say that's an absolute truth that thing sucks. You don't have to do much math to figure out the equation of any value exchanges. The value seems perfectly positive in terms of, well, that seems like a reliable thing to eliminate as a cause, because it doesn't do anything else but bad stuff. But yeah, many things in society can be labeled as both having good and bad elements, in the sense they cause pain in one group and they cause pleasure in another group, and that has to be decided which one is more deserving or more appropriate or more valuable, the suffering or the pleasure. And clearly those arguments can be made in one, in the sense that I would argue the pain is always more important to prevent than the pleasure is important to create. But it has to be argued. You can't just make a blanket statement and say one size fits all in terms of these equations, because there's going to be some times when it's, you know, a minor inconvenience to one person, a minority of people harmed by, say, wearing seat belts, versus the majority of people unharmed by wearing seat belts. And you have to accept the trade-off because it's logical. Yeah. So, and certainly all this stuff you have to do to maturate a child, you know, the unpleasantness you have to impose to prevent future greater unpleasantness, those kind of logical equations. They're all individual equations. They all need to be argued, but I'm just saying there are logical patterns of framework, you know, that you argue them in, and they're basically, the framework has things to do with consent and whose obligation, who causes the initial action, let's say, that something else is a reaction to, and how much responsibility they have for the creation of the problem, that they're gaining profit from the mess, and, you know, all these, you know, so, but there's all those kind of frameworks that can just be described as something like some idea of deserve and fairness is what you're after, in terms of it's better to allocate some sort of statement of permission and not permission, right, wrong, allowed, not allowed, would be based on some kind of framework that had something to do with these words called deserve and fairness. Because they mean something socially. They mean something in terms of the impact in the future. It's kind of like reward and punishment for crime, even though it's determined that somebody's going to be an asshole. The truth is that you can modify asshole in the future by creating incentives for people not to be that. Obviously, I think if we rewarded intellectual, if we had an intellectual Olympics, we'd have a different culture. If we rewarded people for being decent and kind and honest instead of lying scum, we'd have a different culture. So the truth is that these rewards and punishments, these approvals and disapprovals, these laws that we create are will decide the determinism of the future. They'll be the causes of effects in the future. And so clearly I'd say, we're dropping the ball in huge ways in terms of just creating idiocracy. Dumb people are making the decision for the majority of people. We are allowing the dumbest people on earth to make a problem that the smartest people on earth have to worry about fixing. And that's really dumb. The action of our civilization shouldn't be dictated by the incompetent. It should be dictated by the most competent, that kind of thing. And we don't have any mechanism that does any of that screening. We just say every idiot's entitled, and that's stupid. It's not acknowledging the truth, that there's a difference in the quality of the judgment, and the real value is the strength of the intellectual argument. And the ignorant people have really weak arguments in defense of their bullshit, such as God says I can, that kind of crap. So anyway, he's defending a version of nihilism, like I said, that's sort of based on this I like pizza, you like banana cream pie, blah blah blah, and that's in my opinion quite irrelevant, that kind of nihilism. And that the only part of this that matters is the fact that you must acknowledge the existence of this distinction between a conscious feeling thing and an unconscious non-feeling thing. It's a huge difference. It's all the difference in the universe, so to speak. It's everything in terms of value. All value is in some way a derivative of something that feels. You can't derive value without anything feeling in the universe. There wouldn't be anywhere to derive it from. So it's all created by impacts and consequences on something that's going to manifest a feeling. And I don't think there's any logic that can escape the obligation to recognize the two-ness, so to speak, the realness of value, regardless of its unreal creation, in the sense that it's a projection of a brain. But the fact is, the projection exists. Consciousness, we experience it. It'd be silly for me to say this experience is the same as a gumball machine producing a gumball. It's not the same. It's nothing like it. It's entirely different. And I think through my personal experience I can make the statement. It's undeniable by personal experience. So I'm just saying it's not rationally deniable by personal experience for me to say I can't tell the difference between feeling good and feeling bad. I obviously can do that. And I can obviously tell the difference between feeling nothing and feeling either good or bad. So it would be preposterous not to acknowledge that. It's outside the realm of acceptable or reasonable, in my opinion. We should not accept philosophical points of view that don't acknowledge that truth. It's too stupid. And again, I'm not saying he's being too stupid. I'm just saying this idea of saying, okay, let's have emotional nihilism. Okay, it sounds okay. Yes, let's be emotionally nihilistic. But I mean, that has to be written in big letters, saying that doesn't mean you can evade responsibility. That doesn't mean you can ignore facts. It doesn't mean you can get away from the two-ness and the fact that two-ness plus two-ness equals four-ness. That you can get away from the logic of being obligated to do this value math constantly, to apply your intelligence effectively and to maximize whatever it can produce. And yes, you must make concessions to this emotional animal that needs bananas and needs to play and needs to be entertained. But how much of your intelligence you sacrifice to the needs of that emotional machine is part of the argument here. Who's really driving your bus? The ape or the calculator? And the argument, I think, can't be denied that the real direction, the focus, the attention always has to be on the good judgment, not what the monkey wants. You only concede to the monkey because the monkey is carrying the smart thing. It's like the Master Blaster from the Mel Gibson movie, Thunderdome. Yeah, you have to feed the monkey, but the monkey's carrying something very valuable, the knowledge, and the knowledge is the thing that has the plan, and the knowledge is the thing that's capable of being effective in the world, and so the knowledge can't be diminished or compromised because the monkey wants to jump up and down in a 6-foot-high ceiling and smash the intelligence to pieces till it's dead. You know, that kind of shit. The monkey's got to be put under some sort of leash or restraint. You have to find a symbiotic balance between your emotional needs and your obligation to apply your influence in the world as productively as possible. Because the obligation is real. It's as real as 2 + 2 = 4. If you think your life is just about making yourself happy, then you're a fool. You committed a huge logical error, and it's probably based on some fallacy, okay, of Randian selfishness works or something, where there's no evidence that that has anything to do with what works. Good ideas work, bad ideas don't, and thinking you can take and you'll create a world of givers by taking is idiotic. Okay, that's probably enough. Blah 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 blah. Play a little bit of this video just for the sake of acknowledging it.
He's an analyst that he encountered said if one human being suffers, it's bad for him, but not bad for me, and that if I'm sadistic, it's even good for me if another one suffers. Wow. Yeah, kind of.
Yes, he's kind of getting a little bit too much ground, in my opinion, to this idea again that value is only what our projection says, our emotional projection, and it doesn't get to the root. The root is the fact that we feel, not what makes us feel. So I mean, I've said this so many times, but that's the distinction. The fact that we feel is different than the fact that certain different things can make us feel. Those are two different kinds of things. So why we feel is different than the fact that we feel. And in terms of the value, the fact that we feel is the important fact. What causes feelings, again, is only important in terms of acknowledging that malaria mosquitoes are probably a pretty good thing to wipe out. That there isn't any value equation to be done. It's kind of all one-sided. But yeah, all these others are kind of more complicated. But what's not complicated is the fact that sensations are distinctly different than non-sensations, and sentient versus non-sentient, and that the negative value of suffering is real. It's undeniably important and significant and recognizable. You can see it. You can know it exists. And you have to deal with it as a fact, not as something you can relativize out of its meaning. Alright, that's probably enough. Okay, so till next time, and such, and yes, good. Somebody's making a video. That's good. Just really there's so few people. It's kind of funny. It's like you think with age more, and there's like less, you know, which is weird, in my opinion. But I sort of get it. I mean, it's you know, if only two people are going to be viewing, then you know, it's almost not worth the trouble, right? Yeah. So I can understand why people find it uninteresting as a method of communication, because like everything else, we've allowed it to be run by idiots and trolls and superficial cunts. We always give everything away to idiocracy. And I know exactly why that's happening. They accept that, oh, the idiots are the ones creating all the people. They're raising people to be idiots, and so that's why everybody's becoming an idiot. Is because they're being raised by idiots. Pretty much. Yeah. You can kind of see it in Donald's sons, can't you? I mean, they have that glazed. Where's the Tinker toys? There's no Tinker toys here. You know, they're just like, whoa. There's nothing going on in there. Wow. Echo chamber and such. Anyway, till next time.